Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly chat between two people that know everything. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
And this week we're going to talk about crime.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about crime and its representation by institutions and the government and the criminalisation of poverty and drugs and things like that, and white-collar crime and blue-collar crime and green-collar crime and all the different kinds of crime.
And all the different coloured collars.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about, we might talk about some crime fiction as well, because everyone likes a bit of crime fiction, don't they? My child asked me recently, she said, Mummy, what is the law?
Well, did you tell her?
I did. I told her it was, everybody had agreed what was okay and what wasn't okay. And that was the law.
Right.
And if we didn't have a law like which side of the road to drive on, then, because we were standing by a road, then anyone could drive wherever they wanted to, and then everyone would crash into each other. And she was satisfied with that explanation.
Like the oil that greases society.
Well,
I don't know. How are you, Ivanka? How's life?
life is pretty lovely. I got given 3 sort of old stumps of olive trees to put in pots this week. Well, this morning I went to pick them up, in fact.
Old stumps of
Yeah,
olive.
so like
Doesn't
an
sound
old,
very good.
Well, they're very. I'll show you a picture. You cheeky.
Is it alive?
It's alive, so it looks
Living.
like it's like a living sculpture for the garden. And so
Lovely.
I welcomed them this morning. I potted them in some pots, and I told them they were very welcome. And if they didn't mind, please growing, that would be brilliant.
Do you think there will be olive bearing?
There's no reason why they wouldn't be. I think the idea with these, because they've been moved out of someone's land because of whatever reason. So it's more, the emphasis is more on the wiggly old stump than it is on the leaves.
Old trees can grow fruit indefinitely, right? Unlike old animals.
I don't think that is. I think, if you are actually, let's say you're some form of commercial farmer who cares about how many apples you get on your apple tree, or I do believe there's a point at which their yield drops.
Right.
But I think for, if you're going to have an apple tree in your garden, I'm not sure how much that matters. There will still be apples.
Apple trees seem like a big problem to have in the garden. There's a lot of picking up rotten old apples from the garden and trying to fob them off on people.
That's true. Lots of worm-ridden.
Do you want a bag of frozen apples? Yes. Oh, yeah, I'm going to definitely make an apple crumble with that. That's definitely going to happen.
I have a very small apple tree in my garden. And what else has happened this week? I feel like I've had things to report, but my enjoyment of my olive trees this morning has dislodged my thoughts on what is amazing in my life right now. Yeah, I've got nothing to tell you really. How are you, Michael?
Oh, mate, I'm very excited. I have had my new app approved by Apple. Apple now approves of me. I got it through first time. I even remembered to put an Apple Watch screenshot in, and it's got multiple screenshots all customised and a video, and it's just, I'm trying to leave no tiny little detail unchecked. I got it all up. So now I've just got to do put some copy in the website and finish that off, and then today will be, aka last Friday, will be release day. I totted up how many hours work. It was 547 hours of my time that I've spent on this.
Wow, so that app must be like millions of pounds worth of app.
A few tens of thousands of pounds worth of developer time, let's say, that I now feel responsible to it's an asset I now have.
Does one have to pay for this app if one wants to install it? How much is this app, Michael?
It's going to be $3.99.
$3.99. That sounds like a bargain, Michael.
I've put in one of the screenshots, if an app is free, it's usually your data that is for sale. And this is an app where, because it's all about your personal diary and private information, it's very important that we don't sell anyone's data. So that's why it costs a little bit of there's a bit of cash for it. And I think it's going to be worth it for anyone using it. So there you go. That's out. So that's the main thing in my world. Other than that, also I discovered TikTok this week. I've been listening. So there's this gamer on YouTube called Northern Lion that I've been watching him play this same game for about 5 years now, 6 years.
Weirdo.
No, 5 years probably, and it's just this, and he's just like very articulate and smart, and he doesn't repeat himself, and it's just really good.
Sounds amazing.
But he started a podcast with another friend of his, a streamer friend who is a reality TV star, but like a former reality TV person who's now like a YouTube and Twitch streamer type person. But they were talking about TikTok, and I realised that the stuff I was doing on Instagram actually probably works better on TikTok, where the videos have sound and are moving by default. So if anyone's on TikTok, feel free to come and find me on it, because I don't know, apparently it's kind of feels like YouTube used to feel for these people. So yeah, that is worth having a listen to that podcast if anyone wants to hear someone talk about how to be a streamer / YouTube gaming person / personally self-organised. That's what's it called? Check the Wire, Northern Lion and Dan something or other. Anyway, that's it. That's me. I'm just looking forward to...
You're just high on the success of getting your app out.
Yeah, and we'll see. Then we'll just start watching the numbers and going, my life is over. Why did I waste so much time on this app? Anyway, yes. All right.
Well done.
That was the promotional segment of the podcast.
Mark Ivanka's grand podcast, a podcast in which we promote our own projects.
Yes, well, it's better than promoting someone else's product, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
although less lucrative for us.
Yeah, well, do talk about other people's products as well, if we like.
I mean, I just talked about someone else's podcast, so there you go.
Yeah, anyway.
Do you want to talk about crime?
Oh, yes, I really do.
Okay.
Nothing would give me more pleasure.
So, Ivanka, have you ever been
a criminal,
a perpetrator or victim of crime?
Well, I'm sure. Yes. On both accounts, I'm sure I've done things that have broken the law. Speeding. Is that against the law? Not really. I've never stolen anything. I'm a bit paranoid about that. I think I don't know why that. You know how people do casual shoplifting. Not very good at that. I've got a couple of friends who do, and you walk out of the shop for them, and they go, "Oh, look what fell into my pocket! I'm not going into a shop with you again, weirdo." It's
a victimless crime,
and I laugh about it. Crime. And then a victim.
That's
of
one way
crime.
of starting the conversation, isn't it?
Yeah,
putting you on the spot about crime.
Yeah, and then the other things, have I been victim? Yeah, I've had things snatched off me, house broken into, that sort of stuff. So a hit and our van was parked. Somebody smashed into the side of it and buggered off, and that cost 500 odd quid to fix.
Bugger.
That was not nice.
That feeling of I've been like, I guess, well, we've talked about my various assaults already
yes,
that people have perpetrated on me, but also like, I've been burgled, and I was just thinking about that, the anger you have that someone's kind of crossed that threshold into your house, and the way it's sort of like you sort of don't really feel the same about your home anymore.
No,
for quite a while.
It's a very unpleasant feeling. I mean, we had a motorcycle stolen from outside the front of the house. Like, it was literally leaning against the front of the house. That's how close to the house it was parked, and it got stolen overnight. And even that, nobody entered the house, but the fact that they'd quite obviously followed and knew where Nick's bike was, it wasn't a casual crime. You would have had to have known to go there to get that bike. Because it took one of the neighbours who was up with a baby in the night saw 3 or 4 men standing around our motorcycle, and then when it had gone in the morning, she felt really bad because she hadn't phoned the police. But I mean, she saw them walk away, but they must have come back and lifted it. And that just made me feel very, I don't really care about the bike, but I felt very, I've had many bicycles stolen. But then again, that's annoying and makes me cross. But somebody stealing something from outside your house feels more like a personal attack, I think, or in your house.
It sort of makes you, because it sort of changes your perception of where you thought was safe, the boundaries of like where you were, like what you thought was safe, and so obviously, like this being this podcast, we're going to try and empathise with the person who has
the stealers,
hurt us,
the robbers,
the stealers, and we've just got to like, how do I, when I sort of picture those kids in the alley going, "Do you want us to do you again, mate?" As I walk up the road in the rain, bleeding in London, and I try and sort of imagine empathising with them. It's quite hard to, like someone, the anger comes out in that situation, or that, the fight or flight thing, and it's very hard to sort of, especially someone unrepentant, I think.
Yeah, unrepentant is a thing.
There's crimes, and then there's like that people feel guilty for, and then there's crimes that people have, for whatever reason, have managed to turn off that guilt thing. That then makes you want to really stab them in the face with a glass bottle. It's like,
wow, that's
just for an example.
That is a very violent picture, Michael.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a. The unrepentant thing, I think, is very hard to. But then look, watching a child develop, you sort of realise there's this sort of like, because I know I've done wrong, I'm going to get angry with you for catching me or for telling me off. You can't tell me off, I've done a thing. And like, yeah, but you're wrong. What you've done is wrong and bad, and you can't do that. Yeah, but
and then
you did this to me. So I think I always feel like I'm patronising. And I don't like to patronise, and therefore I question what I'm going to say. But sometimes, so I don't know, maybe we should have an episode about being patronising and being patronised.
Next week decided.
Anyway, so, because I often compare behaviours to children's behaviours, and I think it's because I genuinely think that we all have a responsibility to work on ourselves and improve ourselves. So when it comes to having empathy with the criminal element, I feel like as a society we have a responsibility to help people recover from whatever behaviour. That's sort of what you said, switching off the guilt for doing things. But at some point you have to take responsibility for what you've done.
Yeah, and then you sort of transpose it to a courtroom, and you've got, is courtroom an Americanism? Or is the British, do we have courtrooms? Or are they
we
just
have court? I think
we just have court. You don't have a courtroom in the UK, do you? Anyway, you just sort of transpose it to someone who's... Nothing is their fault, basically. When someone is like on that stand and the judge is going, you've got, and then they're going to get sentenced because nothing's their fault. And that's a kind of, they're the defendants, so they're going to be defensive in one way or another. So I feel like
it's kind of their responsibility.
I think people do want to feel like a good person. So any way they can find to avoid it being their responsibility is sort of the way that that people can still sort of live with themselves. And then you so that's the sort of more street level stuff. You see people not taking responsibility. But whereas the more sort of white collar crime, where someone's on the stand, they just shield themselves with the expensive lawyer, with the expensive sort of counsel that will just kind of like, it's more I don't have anything to worry about feeling, I guess, because this is taken care of and this is in the remit of what I'm allowed to do.
But then I think a lot of white-collar crime, people treat it as though it's a game, a sort of, I tricked the system, I found a way of tricking people out of their money, cons, that sort of like the perception of with some of these, some kind of fraud criminal activities and things like this, is that you were clever and you came up with a scam, people were stupid for being scammed, but nobody got hurt. It's like, yeah, they did, because they got scammed, and that's a really awful feeling, and they lost money, and you don't know what the knock-on effect is of the scam that you...
Yeah, and you didn't directly give them bruises and blood pouring out of anything, so you sort of feel like you didn't really do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Even though they probably... I'm just thinking of that Adam Sandler film, what was it, Uncut Gems, that we watched, which is definitely worth a look.
Right.
It's very good, but like...
Adam Sandler?
Yep. Playing this truly like unpleasant... Well, just this... Yeah, he's just living this life of like rich lifestyle with the mistress and the family, but it's all kind of built on this jewelry store. And he's just constantly like, someone gives him a thing and he's like pawning that to pay off some debt, and he's gambling. Like he just, every time he's got some money, he just cannot stop. He just always gambles it, 'cause he's always sort of going for that big win. It's a really interesting film because the description of it, like the synopsis of it, is sort of written from the point of view of the main character, and it's like he's a charismatic man and he's just looking for that one big win. But when you're watching the film, it's like, I mean, maybe he sees himself like that, but it's impossible for anyone else to. He just seems sort of I don't know, desperate the whole time and just living so far beyond his means that he's sort of dependent on these windfalls to even just kind of stay afloat. And I think that's an interesting... Well, that's just a picture I sort of see when you talk about... And he's just constantly barely avoiding getting the shit kicked out of him from various debts or whatever, and having to kind of like... So it's that sort of like he's playing kind of that I'm going to figure out how to get something for myself taken to that sort of nth degree, and you're sort of seeing the consequences. He's sort of barely keeping people at bay that want to hurt him.
But I think one of the things that, in terms of the empathy with the criminal, the word desperate is quite interesting, because the desperation might come from various reasons. Desperation might be sort of in some way, if you're living beyond your means, a desperation to have or the desperation because you need to feed somebody, or the desperation because you need to feed yourself, or because you're ill, or because you can't get a job, whatever. But desperation is a feeling that I think must be part of a lot of criminal activity, surely, or I don't know.
Yeah, well, you're not going to... you put it in a drug context.
Yeah.
Where you've... And the way I always talk about this is when your life is not going very well, drugs are at least one guaranteed way to feel good for a bit.
Yeah.
And then that's what the addiction is. Like, people that go into hospital don't get addicted to morphine. I don't think I'm addicted to morphine. But like, if that's your only source of solace in an otherwise brutal world, then yeah, like, of course you're going to sort of find that compelling. And then, and drugs are really, really cheap compared to any other sort of activity that makes you feel good. So the fact that if you haven't even got enough money to buy the drugs that make you feel better for a couple of hours every day, and the only way to get like a fiver, a tenner, 15 quid is to start like smashing windows and trying to sort of take things off people. And there's nothing more desperate than that, is there?
No.
Like, I'm already at rock bottom because I'm dependent on these chemicals to, feel anything remotely worthwhile. And now I can't even get the chemicals, and combine that with just the absolute galling inequality of seeing people with so much, and that like they would have to sacrifice so little for you to just be so much better off, that it's probably, it probably doesn't take a lot of soul searching to resort to what we call crime. It's a crime. It's crime. I'm not going to say it's not crime. It's crime because it's in breaking the law, which we kind of want.
We've all agreed that you're not allowed to do that.
We've all agreed, and then more recently, the powerful companies have set a lot of what the laws are as well, haven't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's also different kinds of crime. There's crimes. There's white collar crime. One colour crime is white. There's fraudy type crime, money crime. Then there's, biffing people over the head with things type crime. There's actual harm, physical actual harm crime. Yeah. But then there's crimes like behaviours that are deemed by a certain society to be unacceptable, like the crime of being homosexual, or one of those, those are the crimes that then become... If you're in a society where those things aren't a crime because they are normal human behaviour, that's when I think it gets tricky, because what is normal human behaviour can be criminalised. I mean, like in Saudi Arabia, women driving cars was a crime, or going out without your owning husband, brother, father, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, and this is where we realise that crimes aren't set by that the law isn't made by all of us. It's made by the most powerful, and like probably in a way that doesn't necessarily benefit the rest of us. All these books, the sort of like Gladwell style books that used to always bring up Rudy Giuliani's success in New York with the zero tolerance policy.
Yeah.
And now sort of who Rudy Giuliani has become, and you sort of look back at that, also thinking about who the zero tolerance, no broken windows, which was like first introduced to me in a Java refactoring test-driven development course. It was like, what we do is we make sure there's because the mayor of New York had this really brilliant success in just kind of catching people for all the small things. So like they turned it into a, like, how do we feel about this now, like a couple of decades on?
I don't know any data on it, but
the city felt safer for everyone, didn't it? It sort of turned it from, like a scary place into a relatively safe feeling place when they started prosecuting people for jumping turnstiles and stuff. But who did it victimise?
What's happened to those people? Because this is what one thing we hear about in America, and I do not have the statistics in front of me. I picked up on it recently. It was this thing where, you get arrested for something tiny, and then because you can't afford to pay let's say you got a parking ticket, so you end up in court, and then you can't pay the fine, so you accept some jail time, and then you're gone. You've had it.
Yeah, and that's another thing I wanted to bring up was The Night Of, which I don't know if you've seen that. It stars Riz Ahmed, and it's got John Turturro in it as this sort of lawyer. But it's this college kid that basically has a weird night that he can't remember all of it, and there's someone dead. Like I can't remember. He wakes up next to this girl dead, and to be honest, he doesn't really know what happened. But he ends up in the prison system, but he's like a nice kid, but like it's not too long until he's sort of like, you see the way that it only causes problems to put people into that system, especially if they didn't start out like that sort of with that mindset. They will certainly come out of it with that mindset. But there was no rehabilitation on offer. It was like the people in that system,
But I mean, we've got that statistic that we've mentioned before on the podcast, which is like something like 3% of the British population is in care, but over 50% of people in prison have been in care. So it's like all this kind of poor start in life, or inadequate interventions at the right time. So maybe if you view the whole no tolerance thing as intervening really early in some way, then perhaps the sort of the punishment method might not be something I don't know enough about to comment.
Yeah, if you made zero tolerance, like low threshold for, we need to figure out how to help this person.
Yeah. Then I think it's cool.
Because I think if you do, like, it doesn't, it's like similar to the NHS sort of thing. Like now you don't really get anything looked at until it's relatively chronic.
Yeah.
And which then you're sort of spending a lot more effort on something that could have been avoided if it had been nipped in the bud a bit better. Well, that's what schools are supposed to do, isn't it?
Yeah,
teachers are supposed to keep an eye on the kids and
report. But I mean, an example of the early intervention, like in adult social care, is the service that goes around to old people's houses and cuts their toenails.
Right.
It costs, in a city like Brighton, I think it costs something like £1 million. Like, it's not without cost.
Right.
But the amount of things it avoids, because after a certain age, cutting your own toenails is really hard.
Yeah.
And so, but if you have someone coming to see your toes once a month or every 2 weeks or whatever it is, they will notice an infection. They will notice if you're infirm on your feet. They will notice things. Right. That means, because what is expensive is an old person who can't walk.
Yeah. I thought you were saying that they sent young offenders around to cut old people's toenails.
Mind you, that would probably be a good. But you do need some training, I think, to cut old people's toenails. Well. But train them all in podiatry or chiropody or however you pronounce that word. I don't know. But anyway. Early intervention and prevention are nice, fancy words, but they need a lot of... they cost money to find out why somebody's so angry or upset or desperate when they're a young teenager. Why are they behaving in a particular way? Or...
I think it takes a sort of more skilled... It takes more of skill and, talent for that sort of thing to... be able to figure that sort of thing out versus I'm not going to say policemen are, I'm not going to characterize policemen as not that's more of a if someone does something bad we can hit them with a stick kind of thing than we're going to try and therapize them and get into their head and I think the police at their best are using empathy and sort of stopping and talking to people and trying to figure out what's wrong and having ideas, but it's not necessarily the picture we have of a police.
Well, I don't think they're given... I mean, kids get threatened. Oh, don't do that. We'll call the police. The police come. What do the police do? They take you away and put you in a cage. I think my daughter watched something where the police came and put somebody in, quote unquote, a cage. She goes, if I go... This is what she said. She said... if I was in there and they put me in a cage because I'd done something wrong, but I said, yeah, I did it and I'm really, really sorry, could I then go home? And I was like, we were like, well, it really does depend on what you've done. And but if I said, I was like,
that's kind of the idea of it.
It is really sort of, but they're not just going to let you go home. It's very hard. Some of the questions are just like, what? Can't we do? Look, let's watch a cartoon. Here's my phone. No, have an iPad. But
you do think of the police as sort of like this slightly threatening force. It's like how Steven Pinker talks about it is that, well, I think he's paraphrasing, but it's the state's monopoly on violence is the police force. So they're the only ones allowed to shoot you, and everyone else has to not do that sort of thing. But I was just thinking about when I got burgled. And I got a phone call, and it was like, "Oh, can you come home? Your flat's been burgled." I was like, "Oh, fuck!" So I sort of cycle home from LBI and sort of get there, and I just remember going like, "Oh, how did you find out my phone number?" And the guy's like, "Oh, well, we kind of saw this, and it had your number." I was like, "Oh yeah, like police. You sort of figure things out, don't you?" I'd sort of forgotten about that aspect of police work. That the cool side of being police is you actually try and solve crimes and figure out what happened and stop people getting away with stuff.
But I think the police are also some of the stories I hear from my sister and some of the dealings she has with these multi-agency is what the term is, where everyone gets together, is that, there is a huge amount of policing that is just about sensible, proportional responses to what's going on, particularly when you're dealing with children or families that are dysfunctional. You've still got to, there is a degree of that. But then also, it is kind of society's enforcers. It's like, if you're not going to do it nicely, if you're not going to play with everyone else, yeah.
What do you think Boris means when he says we're going to put more police? What do you think he's thinking?
He's thinking about a Daily Mail reading racist Leave voter. Sorry, did I say that? No, he is. He is. He's thinking about somebody who reads the Daily Mail, who opens it and reads about knife crime in London and thinks, well, if there was more police, there'd be less knife crime. Instead of going, if there was less poverty and more education, there'd be less knife crime.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it is. Or if they had more police around there arresting these kids and taking their knives off them. No, it's like if with you, going back to patronising Ivanka, when you're dealing with my child, I ask her to do something. Many times she'll just go, no, I don't want to. Let's go home from the park. No, I like it here. I want to stay in the park. Well, we need to go home. So you start with reasoning. We need to go home because we need to start cooking dinner. If we don't cook dinner, we're going to be hungry. We won't have any dinner. Yeah, but it's nice in the park. Let's. Daddy can cook dinner. Yeah, but Daddy's doing something. And then eventually you go, listen, if you don't leave the park now, then
things is getting punitive.
Then you have a choice. You have a choice: leave the park now and have a lovely, relaxing dinner with Mummy and Daddy, or I will come over there and I will pick you up. I will carry you out of the park, and you won't be able to go on a play date tomorrow. And then it's like, your choice. But it's very hard disciplining a child. But then again, this is the patronising kind of. The idea, because I do think some sort of punishment or consequences is an important part of teaching and talking and discussing behaviour. However, I don't think I think the cutting the toenails aspect of crime prevention involves getting rid of a lot of poverty. You know, that sort of, we can't just run in with truncheons and more police. So I think Boris is speaking to the audience of people who voted for him, which are blue collar, lots of coloured collars today, blue collar British people who traditionally voted Labour, who have been totally, indoctrinated with Rupert Murdoch's anti-everybody, everything. And they'll go, oh, that Boris, he's a good man. Look, he's given us all the police back that we used to have before his government got rid of them. I didn't ask you. Have you ever done any crimes?
Have I done any crimes? Well, I don't know. Copyright crime, certainly. But I think, I once stole some sweets once just to try it in a shop. And obviously, drugs aren't legal. But apart from that, I've never figured out how to get something off someone that's not.
Yeah.
I've always tried to earn things. But I don't know.
No, I'm not really invested any energy in. Maybe this is how we avoid working. Michael and Ivanka's grand podcast, the podcast in which we work out how to do crimes.
Michael and Ivanka's grand heist. Let's do it.
That's what we should do.
Be good.
Ha That's the answer. But
here's I'm going to tie two thoughts together. I'm just realising. I think, how much do you think we could solve by leading by example? How much would be solved? Because I got the punishment in my house was if I was naughty, I got spanked. And, it was violence. And then that meant that the way I treated my younger brothers was if they did something I didn't like, I would hurt them. And it just... Violence begets violence, and then you think about The Wire and you think about how the police behaves with the criminal element. They use violence on them, especially America, but I'm sure UK as well. But if you use violence to solve crime or to try and fight crime, then all you're going to do is create more violent crime because you're sort of but is that true? If there was more empathy in policing, would people who are currently just feel like the police are the enemy and are just victimized by them, would that reframing of what the police do actually help? Would would it work, or would it make people just sort of feel like, they're soft touch, we'll get away with it? An example of, I'm just thinking of this really good, and this is in a small way, like this really good moment in Top Boy. I can't remember if it's the second series, but there's this sort of immigrant family living in this, squat, whatever, and the mother goes to the local shop and she sort of gets her groceries, but she hasn't got enough money for nappies and stuff, so she sort of steals some nappies, and then the shop person catches her and calls the police, and then the police come, and the police goes, okay, well, so she paid for that stuff and she stole the nappies, and the guy's going, yeah, what are you going to do about it? And the policeman goes, well, how much were the nappies? And he goes like £4, and he's like, well, here's £4. And the guy in the shop owner's like, what? This is an outrage. And the woman, but it's like that. It could be that, couldn't it?
Yeah. That is the level of, but goes back to poverty. Why should there be in modern society, in a world where there is enough wealth if it was shared out appropriately? Why should anybody not be able to afford nappies for a baby?
No, I know. And also, like, if you're an immigrant or a refugee and you're not even allowed to work. You're literally not allowed to work legally.
I don't understand that.
Well, how do you even reconcile that morally?
I genuinely don't understand what problem that solves, not allowing migrants. Whilst your status is being discussed, get a job. And then, if we decide we're sending you home because you've not proven your refugee status, well, then you can go. But in the meantime, you've been you know what I mean? It's like, but they'll form ties with society, and then it'll be harder to get rid of them. Oh, those immigrants come over here and they don't form ties with society. It's like, which one do you want? And that sort of thieving of things you need is also like it's just a different kind of crime, I think. It's a social crime.
There's always the moral example. If he stole a loaf of bread to feed his family, would it be a crime? Yeah, there's that sort of moral question. But what we're saying is that why is it that we're in a situation where someone can't even, doesn't know where they're going to be in a month, in 3 weeks, in 2 weeks, because everything's so uncertain. Why this should not be the baseline.
I mean, I've also, there's that thought exercise from that book, The Life You Can Save. It's not really, well, it's not crime, but it is. It falls into this moral conversation. It's like you're walking to work and you see a child drowning in a pool. What do you do? Well, of course, I jump in and save the child. You're walking to a job interview that's really important. You really need a job, and you see a child drowning. Well, of course, I'll jump in and get there. You're wearing, £400 shoes, and you've got your newest laptop. Well, of course, I'll jump in the pool and save the kid. It's like, well, if you are not paying your taxes, you are walking past drowning children. Is basically, if you can donate $5 and buy somebody a mosquito net that saves their life, or if you are, so then you know what I mean. It's that sort of. There are lots of things that aren't technically a crime, like tax avoidance. They are almost always very legal, but they're just reliant on.
There's immoral activity that is legal, and then there is defensible activity that is illegal. And currently the balance is way the wrong way, and that's because the people have the most power are setting what is legal and what isn't legal. They're the people with the lobbyists. Yeah. If homeless people had lobbyists, I think it would be a different society.
Yeah. It's like, who had this conversation the other day? I get this well, if you can't afford your children, you shouldn't have them. It's like, fuck off. Basically, it's like, what if I got ill? What if my partner died in a car accident? What if, what? There's a million, there's this assumption that you and I bang on about all the time. It's like, you're assuming that you are okay and you are going to stay okay forever. Yeah. Like, disability benefits. Every single one of us could become disabled tomorrow, today. Why wait till tomorrow? It's like this idea that you're. So I find that whole, well, if you can't afford it, you shouldn't be worried. Yeah, great. That we all set out with that intention, but sometimes things go wrong. What was my friend? One of my friends did that when they did the limit to the benefits just to 2 children, unless you could prove you were raped. And she's like, well, what are you supposed to do if you've got 4 children? What do you do? Give them 1 shoe each? What are you supposed to do? It's just
and it's the it's just part of that is people being bad at designing systems as well. Like, it's like, well, what the fuck is that? Shall we just finish this off by talking about what our favourite crime fiction? What's your favourite crime fiction?
Brilliant. I love it. I love all of it.
Okay,
that's all I have to say on the subject.
You got no examples. My stepmom has absolute bookcases of crime novels, like tiny little, pulp crime fiction. I've never read a single one.
You've not read a single
interest.
One? I started reading like Agatha Christie stuff when I was like, I don't know, 12, 13. I do like a crime. I watch crime on telly. I'm a bit over these whole like one episode and then there's a thing and somebody's brutally murdered and then the magic in the lab and they sort it out. I'm not that into those. But that for me, that's a great guilty pleasure, those. Oh, and then there was a thing and look, we found this little bit of...
What about like the true crime, like the Serial or Making a Murderer type stuff? I have my tolerance for murdery things has changed since I produced A Human.
I find it it's different. I've never relished horror-y things.
No.
But I've not, I find psychopaths fascinating and that kind of thing, like normal. I think that's quite normal to think of psychopaths. Just regular stuff, liking psychopaths, watching people get murdered on the telly. No, I like a detective.
We do revere, like it's amazing how we do like a detective on telly a lot of the time, but we also like someone that breaks the law in a morally defensible way.
Even sometimes not a morally defensible.
No,
I love a bit of Peaky Blinders. That's mostly crime. They're always being criminal.
Okay, well that's TV and stuff.
What about you, Michael? You mentioned The Wire.
The Wire is obviously like a brilliant picture of how Baltimore's institutions operate and from the different scales of The Wire, if you haven't seen it, obviously I'm not going to be the guy that goes, you've got to watch The Wire, but if you haven't seen it, what are you doing? Frankly, what the flipping is you're missing it.
What's that, Breaking Bad? Did you not enjoy Breaking Bad?
It was like
I got bored of it.
We're running out of time, but it is fucking boring, Breaking Bad. But for some reason, the guy has a talent for making you sit through the most boring rubbish because you just want to know what's going to happen. You just want to see the ending. You just want to see the outcome. So you sit through 27 different awkward dinners, like families sitting down for dinner and saying nothing, like for hours on end, just to go, okay, well, where did the floating pink bear come from, though? Or like, basically, it peaked at like episode 6, and then I don't think I even got that far. Episode 3, I think it peaked, but I still watched the whole thing. But Sharon could see right through it, and she was like, I can't. What is this? This is too boring to watch. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It's not.
I think
really
Nick
worth the
and I
payoff.
had maybe even a 3-year gap, and we would like, you know what I mean? We watched, let's say, a series or 2. How many were there? 4, 5, 6, 75? I don't know. Anyway, maybe we watched a couple, and then I go, it tends to be me going, I just cannot, no, this is a waste of my life. I'm not going to go and do something else. And then
I was like that with Lost, actually. Like, I just stopped. Season 2, I was like, what are you doing? And then, like, I heard, like, the ending was quite something. I was like, okay, fine, I'll watch it. But I was like, what?
Yeah, I never watched it.
Why are you wasting my time?
But yes, so...
Anyway,
crime. Now
he makes all Hollywood films, J.J. Abrams, so I guess it paid off. Lost was very popular as well. Anyway, we've rambled on a bit too much. Maybe we should just recommend TV shows instead of talking about our lives.
I do need a new recommendation because I've finished Sex Education. By the way, I can't bring myself to watch any telly now. Nothing compares.
There's so much. I don't even know what to. We're watching that Hunters on Amazon Prime at the moment, which is actually very good.
Hunters
gets into some pretty dark Nazi behaviour. With lots of stuff in the camps and this kind of thing, so it's like a bit intense, but like actually really good.
All right, we'll see.
I'm looking forward to being able to. I'm thinking of doing this like Bollywood film reviews on my YouTube channel somehow, because we've been watching one each week, and I tell you, the one we watched last week was nuts, and like it's really hard to know what to make of some of these. But anyway, I'll talk about that another time. Okay,
that was that. Crime, together we'll crack it.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you're at your phone, why not subscribe if you're not already? If you're at near someone else, why not,
subscribe them.
Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find me at goodtohear.co.uk, which is like my app shop. I just updated the website last week, so it's looking nice now. So if you want to have a look at that, you can do that. Look at my apps and get my new app. Go and get that. Please get my app. Please. I don't want to have to go back to contracting. And I've worked so hard on it. Please get my app. It's on iOS though. And you need a phone that can do augmented reality. Ooh. Anyway, what else?
If you could write us some reviews and things like that, that would be super cool. Though our favourite friends have all already done them. So, the people we love the most. We always like it. Also, drop us an email. We always like to hear what's going on and what you think and what we haven't said and all the things we forgot to say and what it made you think of. All of that is good stuff, and that's what we're trying to.
That's hello@grandpodcast.com.
Thank you, Michael.
That's how you finish that sentence.
Yes. Thank you.
Patronising next week. So yeah, I think that's it. If you want to click on our Amazon links, if you want to click on those book links, do. If you want to patronise us, you can. So, there we go. All right, see you next week. Bye.
Bye.